and welcome to another episode of Faculty Lounge Live. My name is Tanya Goldberg, and I am an instructional designer for the Center for Online and Continuing Education. I'm here with Dr. Michelle Vaughan from the College of Education. For those of you who are just joining us today or don't really know what these Faculty Lounge Lives are all about, it's basically we wanted to highlight some of the faculty that we work with who have created some really great courses and have put maybe some innovative technology or other things in their courses. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce you to Dr. Michelle Vaughan.
Hi.
Hi. Could you tell us a little bit about yourself and about your background?
Sure. I'm from the College of Education, as you mentioned, the Department of Curriculum and Instruction, and I'm an associate professor there. I also am a graduate coordinator for some of our master's programs there. We have 8 master's programs. 3 of them are fully online. And I think most importantly, too, I'm an action researcher, which means that I study my own practice and I study the practice of others. So I study teaching, and that means that probably in the last 10, 12 years ago, that also means studying how technology has impacted teaching,
Right.
because that's been a part of all of our lives. So I've looked at how that has happened in my own practice, and then in the practice of my colleagues, and in the practice of teachers that I work with in the College of Ed, to get an idea of how technology impacts what we do.
Awesome.
Mm-hmm.
That's great. And so how has your experience been teaching online and working with our department, the Center for
Well, it's
Online?
been great. Before I was here at FAU, I did a couple years at Florida Virtual School, and that's where I really got introduced to online teaching. I was a classroom teacher before that, and then when I was at Florida Virtual School, I oversaw some of their course development in the English language arts area. And that's when I first got introduced to what you could do with online teaching and what online learning looked like, as opposed to taking what you did face-to-face and just putting it online. That's where I learned what an instructional designer was, what web developers were. I really got an idea of the types of innovation that you could do online and really started to think about it differently.
Right.
So then when I came to FAU and we started to move consciously into the world of online learning and started to put programs online, it was really great to have that background and to be able to apply it to what we do at FAU and with the COSI folks. And we've had that partnership, at least my department has, with COSI for at least 10 years, working together with our faculty members and trying to really create innovative things. So it's been great. Yeah. More to come too.
That's great to hear. That's great to hear. All right. So you've been teaching now a while online. Have you found that there's some things that you're able to do online that you're not able to do in person, or vice versa?
Yeah. And both of those things are definitely true. Yeah. I think that for all of us and I love to teach face-to-face.
Yeah.
I love to be in a room with students. I love to feel that energy and have that dialogue. And there are some things that work really well face-to-face. And I think there's a mental shift that needs to occur when you go into designing and thinking about teaching online. Because I think one of the flaws sometimes that we walk into is the idea of, okay, I'm going to have this great face-to-face class, and I'm going to put all my resources online for my students, or I'm just going to take what I do here and move it here.
Yeah.
And that doesn't work because the modality is completely different.
Right.
And the way students learn is completely different.
Right.
So taking what you want to do with a course and thinking about, okay, how is that going to look online, I think is the first step. Because there's some things that I can do online that I can't do face-to-face, which I love. For example, to be able to use the discussion board to have students get a lot of feedback from each other is a really good practice that works well online. Posting drafts, posting outlines, and having them kind of scaffold their assignments works really well online.
Right.
To take face-to-face class time to do that would be kind of chaotic, not the way I would want to use that type of class.
Right.
So, and then there's, dialogues and conversations I can have face-to-face that need to look different if I'm going to do them online. So I would say you can meet any objective in either modality, but if we don't shift our methods to match the modality, then there's a little bit left on the table.
Right. So one of the things that really brought my attention to yourself in your course that we worked on together was your use of more authentic assessments and kind of having some more active learning in your course, and also the integration of technology, of having your students use technology. So can you talk a little bit about the benefits that maybe your students have had with these authentic assessments?
For sure. And thank you for that. And I had a great time working with you on this course.
Thank you.
So shout out to Tanya. One of the terrible parts about teaching is that our students will not remember everything that we've taught them.
Right.
And that's a fact,
Yes.
right? And I don't remember what the most current numbers are, but it's below 50%.
Oh, wow.
That they are going to not remember the things that, and we don't get to pick
Right.
the 50%
Yeah,
either.
exactly.
So it's not like I'm going to be able to say, like, if there's one thing you remember this.
Yeah.
But what we know from learning theories and educational psychology is that we can do certain things in our teaching and our curriculum and our instruction to bring up the level of transfer of knowledge.
Right.
So there's certain conditions that we can create that will ensure that it is more likely that a student will transfer some of the knowledge they've gained, hopefully the really important parts, into their real life or into the next course or into the next assignment, into whatever. And one of those things is authentic assessments, as well as kind of also thinking about assessments as bringing down the high stakes nature of it, creating, more frequent assessments, those types of things. We can do a lot of work in the assessment area to try to ensure transfer of knowledge. So creating authentic assessments that have something to do with either what the students is going, their real life, where they're going to apply it. Maybe it's job embedded, something like that. It allows, designing the assessments in ways that allows them to bring prior knowledge into it, making them so that they don't feel like they don't match their day-to-day interaction with the content.
Right.
I think when we think about assessments, we want them to be just a natural next step of what the instruction is. This is what we're doing in class, and oh yeah, this also is going to be an assessment. So the more natural it can be with your instruction, the more likely they are to also do well on it and then use that information in the future.
Right. That's great. And how do you think you've benefited as an instructor with these more authentic assessments? Do you see anything coming out of it?
Yeah. I mean, I enjoy reading them, they're, and that helps. Before I was in higher ed and at Florida Virtual School, I was a classroom teacher.
Right.
And there is something about having to sit in a parent conference and to be able to have to say with absolute certainty that a child knows something or doesn't know something, and to their parent. That makes you as an educator want to ensure that you know that for real.
Right.
And not that they just guessed right on number 3,
Right.
but that there are multiple ways that you can show that somebody knows it or doesn't. And I think having that experience, or at least kind of visualizing that experience and saying, do I know for sure if my student knows this, has not only a benefit for me, hopefully for my students as well, but having a better handle on the types of assessments that I'm doing with my students benefits me because I can say that,
Right.
So not having, one high stakes assessment at the end of a course, but having more frequent opportunities for assessment along the way so that I can have better data on my students and say, okay, this student doesn't seem to be grasping this content. This is a reteaching opportunity. This student knows the content, but the writing is getting in the way.
Right.
They need support, from the writing center or some other type of scaffolded way. This student is doing a bang up job of it and maybe could be a great peer reviewer for this student,
Right.
But you don't know that unless you have some more authentic, frequent assessments embedded along the way. So it definitely benefits me because it makes me better at my job.
Yeah,
And-
definitely. And I'm sure that the students really appreciate the feedback that they're getting also throughout
Absolutely.
the process, because that is really helpful for
It's
students.
super helpful. And I'm glad you brought that up because the opportunity for them to get the feedback and then to feed it forward into the next assignment doesn't occur if
Yeah.
there's no connection.
Yeah.
Right. So, I mean, and this, we talk about this as faculty all the time. We spend so much time giving feedback,
Mm-hmm.
and especially if it's on the last assignment of the semester.
What do
We
you
don't,
do?
yeah, what are they
There's
going to do
nowhere
with
else
it,
to go at this
So
point,
you
yeah.
got to have them spaced out so that they have something to do with the feedback. Yeah.
Great. So we've talked about authentic assessments and how we think it's important to kind of vary those assessment styles. So with the whole current growth in AI language models, how do you feel having these varied assessments is helpful for that?
Yeah. So, one of the things that we talk about, I should say, in like every meeting that I'm in, right, is how some of the AI language models are impacting the assessments that we're giving and also our teaching. By studying technology in practice, right? So one of the things that I do is study, how technology impacts our practice. This is the next thing. Although I think it's probably fair to say that finding ways to, get technology to help you do your assignments has been around for a very long time.
Right.
It's not a recent explosion.
Yeah.
But the first step is figuring out what the technology can do. And I'm not an AI expert in any way.
Right.
But I am a curriculum and instruction expert. So the first step is like, okay, let me figure out what this can do. So, so I've played around with mostly ChatGPT, but like some of the AI language models for a while and seen what it can do just in my work, in my practice, and what it's capable of, right? And so one thing that I found is that it was able to bridge the gap and level the playing field for some of the like knowledge gaps that my students were bringing to the table. So in every class that you teach, you get to certain points in the class. I always call them like choke points, right? And it's like you get to this point in a class where, you're teaching something or you're asking the students to do something, and their prior knowledge or their prior educational experience like doesn't prep them with the skills to do that. And that becomes their choke point. And as an instructor, I don't have like the time or necessarily the resources to kind of fill that gap and quickly and get them to move on. And there's a great resources at FAU that can also help to do that, but it becomes a point for the student where they feel like perhaps inadequate or perhaps that they've lost the momentum of the course.
Right.
And, it's not because that, something has, like, I've done anything or they've done anything. It's just, some kind of gap in their knowledge.
Right.
So one of the courses that I teach asks students to develop research questions and survey questions.
Okay.
Writing really good research and survey questions takes years to learn.
Yes.
Tons of experience.
Yes, it's very difficult.
It's very difficult, right?
Yes.
It's so hard. It's hard for me. And it's like I do it for a living.
Right.
And so, after playing around with the tool, one night in a Zoom session one night, we were embarking on this part of the class, and I said to the students, listen, I know writing research and survey questions is really hard. It's hard for me. And like, you've never done it before. So, we hopped on, ChatGPT or another language model tool. And I said, look, what do you want to write a research question about?
Right.
And, we typed it in and we've got 6 research questions that come up. And now we have an opportunity to get over this like hump of how do I even start with the phrasing of it?
Right.
And say, what makes this good? What makes this bad? What makes this good? And I'm able to fill the gap and level the playing field and move on. Same thing with survey questions, right? Okay, you need 10 survey questions. Let's write 25. And what's good? What's bad? It allows me to teach with it because it hampers some of their learning.
Right.
Yeah.
It looks like we have a question here.
Great.
Let's see who it is.
Hey, Tanya. So we have a question from Abigail. She writes, is there a way for AI to help serve as guideposts to figure out which students might be a good peer reviewer fit for one another?
Could be.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, I think it could be, I guess, depending on, I'm thinking about how you would use peer review in your class. But I think that one of the things that it's important to highlight to students is also what it cannot do, right? So, and I found that by playing with it, right? Like it cannot accurately cite a bunch of work. It cannot, and so finding its home in what it can do for you and talking about that with students, I think is a good starting point.
Yeah.
I think it could help with a lot of things. It always reminds me of the calculator argument in curriculum and instruction, right? So we have this, like when we talk about elementary to secondary, like when do they use a calculator? Like when when is it like, are we shortchanging them by not making them learn it this way? And then we introduce a calculator once they've proven how to do it.
Right.
But like as adults, we always calculate.
Yeah.
Right.
They always used to say you're not going to have a calculator on you always, and now we do.
We have a calculator
So,
all the time.
yeah.
So it always reminds me of that, where it's like something that's being used,
Yeah.
like, you know, something that's being used at home.
Right.
So we have to figure out a way to integrate it. I think peer review is a really interesting idea, and, you know, certainly something to play around with.
Yeah, definitely. I agree. All right. So another thing that really caught my attention with your course was your Photovoice journal discussions that you have the students do. Can you talk a little bit more about that and kind of how you came up with the idea or where that came from?
Sure. Yeah. So shout out to Dr. Baxley, who initially developed the Photovoice assignments. And it does fall under the umbrella of action research. So, you know, it's something that I was really excited to integrate and to work with in the class. So Photovoice is a way of capturing a certain issue in that you might be studying, and we were studying various issues within this global education course in your real world. So this is, you know, totally authentic, right?
Okay.
So if we're studying things like food deserts, or if we're studying pollution, if we're studying, you know, bias in some way, then where do you see that in your life, right? And so, you know, the students are then charged with taking a picture and creating a caption,
which
and
is
then
what I
sharing
loved,
it.
because I love taking pictures, and I was like, oh, that's so cool. I wish I had an assignment like that when I was a student.
And it allows me one to have a connection with them that has to do with their real life. And what we do know about online learning is that connection with your instructor is a huge piece of committing to the course and having buy-in. So it allows me to kind of see into their life and be able to comment on their personal context and kind of have that conversation. And it allows me to see if they understand the concept, if they're, you know, applying it. And it's a very quick and enjoyable grade.
Yes.
You know, from like a heavy lift sort of way. I'm looking at pictures and reading their captions and descriptions.
Right.
You know, and so a great example of that assignment is if we were talking about, you know, the impact of not having access to foods might have on a classroom or teachers, or how students learn. One of my prior students took a picture of her snack closet because, you know, she teaches in an area where students, if they're not having free breakfast at school, may not have eaten before they come to school, which greatly impacts the student's ability to learn in a classroom, right? Yeah. So in order to combat that, she has an entire closet full of snacks, right? And so clearly she understood the impact. You know, in order to teach, in order to do her job, she had to first meet this basic need of getting her students fed. And, you know, I understood that she understood it. And like, we had a great conversation about it. It was great dialogue. And this was all on the discussion board, right? It was great dialogue on the discussion board about the other teachers in the classroom who are doing something similar, or know about other programs, or, you know, it was a great way to share resources. So it's a great assignment because there's so much that students can, you know, taking an idea and finding it in the real world really is working their brain on a different level.
Exactly. It's
And
that active learning piece as
100%,
well.
right. And it's getting closer to the retention, right? It's
Yes.
like we're getting closer to the mark of, yes, they will remember this.
Right.
And it is great to build class community because it's something that's different than I read this and I'm providing a summary on the discussion board.
Right.
So yeah, if you're interested in Photovoice or anything like that, for sure, Google it, look it up, or let me know.
Or if,
let Tanya know.
If you have questions, we are going to have a little 10-minute, 15-minute at the end for questions. So you could also pop in at any moment and ask a question if you have one, or just wait till the end. Another thing that you had in your course was the global issues topic, right? Presentation that the students were doing.
Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, and I think this is something we do a lot as educators. Is we know that when students teach it to others too, right? They gain you know, a greater sense of what the content is too. Right. So and oftentimes there is more to cover than we really have allotted time for. So when you look at your objectives of any course, right? So the next thing after your objectives is to think about, how am I going to know when my students have met that objective, right? And so we have a choice as curriculum designers to think about, okay, what is going to be like the macro and the micro experience of learning, right? They can learn a lot about, a lot about a small thing and a little bit about a lot thing, if we're going to kind of cover a big span here. And so oftentimes trying to chunk some of those materials and give them a deeper experience in a certain portion of the objective,
right,
helps to retain some of that knowledge. And it's a great opportunity for student choice. So in this particular, instance, they're learning a lot about a different global issues and its impact on education, but then doing a deep dive in one that is particularly meaningful to them.
Yeah.
And I think that's a really great opportunity for us as teachers to, again, find more about our students, and then also to allow students to get passionate about something and kind of bring that forward too.
I love that.
Yeah, it's great.
And it's like a teach back as well, because they're teaching their,
Right.
colleagues about
Right.
it.
And I think it's important that, we also are doing the teaching too,
Right.
right? So, and I think, the students want to see not that we're just laying back and being like, you do all
it
of the work,
yeah.
right? So I'm providing a ton of resources and doing my own stuff, but then they really get to add on and look at it like in a different way. And it's really meaningful. It gets people involved. Yeah.
Looks like we have another question.
Okay.
So Tanya, this is from Sierra Mincy. She asks, how often do you use Photovoice assignments, and can they be used sort of like a daily journal for students?
That's a great question.
Yeah.
In a given 15-week course, I think there were 5.
Yeah.
Right. So I think that's a great opportunity for, it's enough assignment so that students don't get assignment fatigue.
Right.
Right. And I think that's something we have to be aware of. If we ask them to do the same thing over and over again, it will lose its novelty. Yeah.
For sure.
So, so they were spaced out and put in like meaningful places, but enough so that you could see, for me, the growth over time. And in something like a Photovoice, the idea is that you're getting students to really think critically about the picture that they're taking and how it captures the issue that you're talking about.
Right.
And not everybody gets that on the first shot, right? So in order for them to grow and for like the feedback to take hold, there does have to be multiple opportunities so that you can really see that. And the beauty of making some of your assessments public, like on the discussion board, because if they just turned it into me, then
they're getting your feedback, but nobody else's.
Correct.
Right.
And so it's such an engaging assignment that putting it on the discussion board for like public view allows them also to see what everybody else is doing. Right. Seeing all the other pictures. And so as an educator too, it also gives me the opportunity to, use the announcements to kind of direct people towards really good kind of like anchor assignments. Like, so I can put it out the announcement and be like, oh God, guys, I loved what you did this week. Have you seen Tanya's post on this? If you have not read Tanya's post, stop what you're doing and go and immediately check it out. I love how she did this. And it's a great way to individually draw, attention to some stellar work. And then also for students who aren't quite sure of, if you're looking at like 25 different ones, like what are the good ones?
Right.
To just kind of draw their attention there and say, okay, this is a great opportunity. So, individual feedback, group feedback, there's a lot of tools to kind of help use your assessments to teach.
And then those competitive type of students probably see that and they're like, oh, now I got to do better so that I could have my name up there.
And in graduate school, and this is a graduate course. So in graduate school, that's a fair bet.
Yeah, for sure. All right. And the other thing that you have in your class is the comparative analysis. Can you talk to me a little bit about your comparative analysis assignment?
Yeah, sure. So the comparative analysis assignment, shout out to Dr. Baxley again. You want to give credit where credit is due.
Yes, definitely.
So the comparative analysis assignment takes an issue that you may be experiencing in education here. Because in our graduate program, most of our students are classroom teachers who are coming back to get an additional degree in curriculum instruction or elementary ed or secondary ed or something like that. So a lot of them have classroom teaching experience. So they're talking about something that's impacting them. And then we're taking a look at what that looks like in other places in the world.
Yeah.
Right. And it really gives an opportunity, and we're reading the research that is going on in other parts of the world and kind of picking your head up and looking around and saying, how are people dealing with these
Right. Getting out of your bubble.
Issue, right. Yeah. The same issue that I'm dealing with in my 3rd grade classroom is going on, halfway across the world in Australia. Like, what are they doing about it? Because there's so much we can learn from each other. So looking at some of these, at the ways that different countries have dealt with things, and the way that we can learn, and making comparisons with each other and educating each other. I've learned so much from my students when they go out and find all these resources and this great research that is going on all over the world by different scholars. I learn a ton by that, and I'm sure that they are learning a lot from each other, and it really is a great it's a great avenue to learn, again, beyond our context, right? Not just what's going on, here in Boca, here in Palm Beach County, here in South Florida, but because there's so much that the same issues that are impacting everybody everywhere. Yeah. So
like when COVID happened and everybody had to kind of move everything online.
Yeah.
So I'm sure you got some good things out of that.
We got some great things, and finding out how different countries dealt with that educationally, like especially like in the K-12 sector.
Right.
Who stayed home, who came back, how did that go? There's a lot to learn just from how different school districts dealt with it here. But looking at what's going on and how it made its mark all over the globe has been, that's a great topic. Yeah. Yeah, for sure.
I loved it.
Yeah.
All right. So I think we've come to the end of my questions. I don't know if anybody else has any questions that they would like to present for Dr. Vaughan here. If not, we will call it, but we're going to give it a couple minutes.
Yeah, this is wait time.
Yes. We want to give everybody a chance to get in their questions.
Get in their questions, get in their typing. Wait time is very hard to integrate into your practice. Especially if you're a fast talker like I am. So if there's questions, now's the time.
Now it's the doo-doo.
Yeah, now we need music. Yeah. Can we make that happen?
Yeah. And there's also a chat. So if you feel like maybe you don't want to unmute yourself and ask a question, you could always put your question in the chat, and we'll have one of the people here read them out to us.
I'll go ahead and ask a question if you can hear me okay.
Yeah.
Okay, great. Hi, Candy Wilson from the College of Nursing. Really appreciated your presentation. And like you, I teach research and very on a journey, personal journey, how to integrate AI into research methods, courses, and so forth. And I'm always struck by, and I'm sure you probably the same thing in your professional discipline as well, what like editors are saying, what funders are saying as far as the integration of AI in building students for the next generation and applying AI in the broader scope than just the classroom, but preparing leaders for tomorrow. If you have any thoughts on that.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's really an important thing to think about. Again, I think about the calculator conversation.
Yes.
If these are tools that are going to be a part of academic world moving forward, right? So we have to learn how to use them, but also how to use them responsibly.
Right.
What they can do, what they cannot do. And so I think there's a lot to be learned from working with our students who sometimes have more capabilities than I do as well, in where the application is. But I also think that we have to, just like in media and in reading where we teach critical consumption of content, we have to also be able to teach, the critical use of where this is appropriate, where this isn't appropriate. And I think those are all really good questions. We've been having these same conversations in my own department, with professional journals and where the line is drawn. And I think that there's going to be more conversations that happen. But I do think that with our students, we also have to have those conversations, because we may be thinking about it in ways that they are not.
Right.
I remember years ago sitting with a student who had plagiarized something. right? So this is early AI, right? You just like took a couple paragraphs from a journal and used it in their own writing. And, I had to have conversations with them. And this was a piece that, they were going to try to get published, right? So I'd have conversations with them that they hadn't even considered, right?
Yeah.
Because I'm thinking about the larger implications, but they're maybe not thinking about that.
Right.
So the conversations of what's right, what's wrong, what's your work, what's responsible, need to continue to happen. But finding out ways, and I think this idea of some things and if you're teaching research, then that students are coming to the table with all sorts of different backgrounds in research based on whatever educational experiences they've had up to this point. And so we can't necessarily assume that they've all got a baseline in something.
Okay.
But I also want to think about our teaching as inclusive, right? Like, what can I do to give more students access to, the next level of learning? Sometimes our academic jargon or our academic, the certain ways that we do things don't value other ways of knowing and other skills that students are bringing to the table. So if there are ways to level that playing field, then I'm definitely willing to make an attempt to try it and to see what it does. Knowing that as an action researcher, my practice changes literally every day. So knowing that I have the freedom as a practitioner to shift and change and move forward and move back, and I need to adjust to the current context and my current students and what their needs are. So it is an ever-changing, there's no hard and fast rules, but we do have to make adjustments and we do have to work with our students to figure out what's appropriate. That was a long-winded answer. I hope if you have a follow-up, let me know.
That was great. Thank you so much. Appreciate your insight.
Let me know if you want to collaborate on your research classes.
I would love that. Okay, follow up.
Hi, Michelle. This is Judy Summers. It's great to see you.
Hi, Judy.
I'm looking forward to connecting, and I love what you've said about bringing into your course. I'm not teaching a graduate level course, and yet I still am bringing them to the research table in a very basic way because they're going to need it throughout their career. One of the things that you all alluded to, and I have been so intrigued with the research that has come out of the COVID experience. And I knew once we got into it that there was going to be a huge opportunity for research and figuring out how students learn. So now I want to bring that into the classes that I teach.
Yeah, Judy, and I don't know if you've seen this in the same way that I have, but one of the things that I've seen specifically in working with teachers is the amount of technological knowledge growth that occurred in a short amount of time with the teaching population is unmatched. Yeah. I mean, so how far are we from COVID now? So 3-4 years ago, pre-COVID, right? There was some work that we were doing as educators, across colleges to help to bring up our students' technological skills, right? We had to think about what are they able to do? What software are they exposed to? What type of skills do I need to build in the first week or so to make sure that they're going to be good online, right? And I think that we have to shift like what we're doing now because our undergraduate students who were online for, a year or two. And, I teach teachers. So those teachers, I mean, our students now have grown so much in what they know that I feel as if I am now running to catch up,
Wow.
Yeah. Like I remember I used to have them giving so many instructions on how to do like an audio, like a narrated PowerPoint. And now they turn in stuff on a program I've never seen. And I'm like, oh, I need to learn about this program. I need to like up my skills.
That's
because
amazing.
They're doing so many things and a lot of their practice is now online. So, it's been a little bit of a shift. So I think we have to acknowledge that everybody learned a lot
Yeah.
when they were home
Yeah.
on the computer, and to bring that in as well. But the research, Judy, is really interesting, and we learned a lot about, you know, my own kids are still in K-12, so I'm watching with like intrigue as what is staying online
Right.
and what is coming back face to face, and which programs are staying. You know, now as people start to make the decisions about what stays and what goes,
Right.
that's the next set
Wow.
of research. You know, like how has our practice been forever changed moving forward?
Mm-hmm.
Let me know what you find, Judy.
Yeah, definitely has. There's a fourth grader in my world, and I am constantly amazed at where she's going and what she comes up with, and how she approaches it. So yeah, and I never step into a classroom, but what I learn something, it is my fervent prayer that they also do.
Yeah.
Absolutely, and I can't believe she's in 4th grade.
She's so cute. Any other questions? All right. Well, it looks like there's no more questions. If you guys do think of anything that you want to put in the chat, I could always talk to Dr. Vaughan and then get you an email back with the answer to that question. Otherwise, it was a pleasure having you here. Thank you so much.
So fun. Thank you, and thanks to the questions. Yeah.
Thank you.